always been about people, mission, customers, and what I like being up at night thinking about. And to this day, it has been about the impact of creators on the world.
Chief Strategy Officer now, EVP Design and Emerging Product at Adobe. What would be in the class Scott Belsky's the most important thing about leadership?
If I had to think of one word, it would probably be empathy.
You have to always be narrating the journey.
Progress begets progress.
You should never outsource your story.
AI, how is it going to impact business models in the future? What I'm more interested in is the implications.
Scott, it's awesome to have you back here on the Learning Leader Show. Welcome, man.
Thanks, Ryan. Good to be here.
5 years, man. 2018, it's so fast. That's the last time we talked. You were in the back of a taxi cab. Looks like you're in a little bit more comfortable settings, which leads to my first question, because I want to hear from you why you prefer a trip and or a vacation that has adventure and friction more so than a vacation to the beach.
Well, listen, I'm all for beach vacations where we can just let our minds, simmer down and just relax and read a book. But I also have come to believe that it is the texture that is added to time as it passes that helped us remember how the time was spent. And so if you think about what adds texture to time, it is challenge, it's adversity, it's surprise, it's once in a lifetime moments, experiences, new things, right? It's things that actually stand out, whereas 30 beach vacations kind of all blend together and you can't differentiate between them. And then if you think about what makes you feel like you've lived long, I imagine that it is what you can remember. And as I think even now, as I approach my mid 40s, what do I feel like my life has been long or not? What I can remember are the things that stand out, and what I can't remember is everything else. And so I've come to believe that you want to remember as much as you possibly whether it be in somewhere random in Arizona or somewhere random in Europe or somewhere that just takes me out of my comfort zone. With my family, we did an incredible trip to Japan, and had all kinds of fun experiences that none of us will ever forget. But even when I'm in places I like to go a lot, like Colorado, just going on new hikes and new places with different people, these are the things that stand out.
Do you think it's an age thing, Scott? Because I am 100% with you when it comes to, I used to really enjoy the beach vacations, but now, especially, and my wife and I are in perfect alignment with this, and that's a good thing. If we get a chance to go away together, the only thing we want to do is hike. We're just looking for beautiful locations in the world to hike. We just did a Sedona trip when it was a little bit cold. It was literally perfect. Like, it was perfect. It was beautiful hikes. And I don't know if there's a better way to take a trip together. But I didn't feel that way 15, 20. I didn't care at all about that. Do you think it's an age thing? What is that?
I mean, perhaps you don't know what you're really missing until you miss it, and you also have the juxtaposition of the, of the beach experience, or the whatever the equivalent is for all of the listeners. But I do, I think that there's something to be said about being pushed in some way that feels enriching afterwards. I mean, listen, I used to hate running, and now I run every day. And part of it is just because of the ritual of pushing myself and the residual impact, on the rest of my day as a result of doing so. But these are just things you have to kind of learn, right?
I have found that to be a commonality among leaders who have sustained excellence, Scott, is that they push themselves both physically and mentally oftentimes. It seems that you've found this with with running. Can you share more about your thoughts of leaders, excellence, and pushing yourself?
Well, goodness, I mean, running to me is a metaphor for so many parts of my life as a leader, and as a builder. Not the things you might expect. For example, we have the tendency to judge ourselves and to judge others and constantly be distracted by the people around us as you're building or founding something or leading something. What you learn in running is that just because you pass someone, doesn't mean that you're a better runner. In fact, you could be expending your energy too fast and they could be the world's greatest runner, or you could be on your first mile and they could be on their seventh mile. You just have no context, right? And I always remind myself of that in my daily life whenever I find myself pacing with others as opposed to myself.
Mm.
So, I mean, and that's just one, right, of many lessons learned. I also believe that you just genuinely have to feel like you deserve the good moments by pushing yourself through the tough moments, and that is truly realized while running. Everyone kind of knows that, and that runner's high that you get afterwards has to be earned. But I also have started to feel like that maps to a lot of other parts of life.
How has pushing yourself physically made you better at dealing with the adverse situations that inevitably
That reflex, like it will be something that they come back to, and that is it becomes a muscle memory that's important to them. In running, there are a lot of muscles that you develop along those lines that I find myself using the proxy of, in another part of my life. It's oftentimes when things get hard, or when you start to, your mind starts to hurt, play against you as opposed to help you. And I think those are just things you have to learn and practice.
Hey everyone, I am Ryan Hawk, host of the Learning Leader Show and owner of this YouTube channel. I just learned a fascinating stat, and that is 95% of people who view our videos are not yet subscribed. And so, if you'd like to ensure you're seeing all of the amazing interviews we're going to do, and we have some good ones coming up, then smash that subscribe button. I know everyone says that, but it's critical to ensure you're seeing what we have coming up. So I thank you for viewing, and I look forward to you being a part of this learning leader journey moving forward. Thank you so much. As a dad, this is a question I ask all dads, especially ones of means like you are, because I constantly worry about messing this up. You have the means to give them whatever they want and need. But you don't want to raise, I'm assuming, but you don't want to raise spoiled, entitled kids. I know I don't, and I'm trying. I think about this every single day. How do you manufacture hardship in their lives? Because we know that develops grit, tenacity, and resilience, the qualities that you have and that we want our kids to have, yet they're growing up with a life that could be easy because you have all of the means to make it that way for them, and you love them. So it's hard to see them struggle, but we know how important it is. So how do you manufacture hardship for your kids so that they grow up to be great, productive adults?
I think it's a great question. It's something I think about very often. The two things that come to mind, number one, are just talking about what hard work looks like, modeling it, and when they are facing something that they are struggling with, reminding them that this is the hard work. And when they're enjoying some luxury, this is what we get with hard work. Kind of reinforcing like how this works is important. But there are many instances where, my kids are struggling with having to do something, and I just remind them, like, this is the hard work. This is what you want to do, right? The other thing is, listen, no matter the degree of privilege, like every kid's going to face hard times, whether it is a health issue or a bullying issue in school or a subject they're struggling with or whatever. And as parents, we have a choice. We can either try to resolve it for them and protect them from it, inoculate them from the anguish, the pain, the suffering, or we can say this is their opportunity to learn resilience, and to learn to regulate their response, their suffering, in this moment. And so that's been, our approach to parenting is like, listen, when they come, let's not try to protect them from it. Like they need these challenges, and they might not get it in other parts of their life. Like they're fortunately able to eat whatever meal they want when they want, and some of these other things that are luxuries for many people. But when they face the suffering, like let's partner with them in it, but let's not shield them from it. Let's not insulate them from feeling the pain, because it's real, right? And this is life, and this is how we build the resilience to be ready for it.
How did your parents help you develop those skills?
Yeah, it's interesting. And this is also like a common conversation in my household, because my wife is the co-founder of a company called Good Inside, which is all about parenting and building a generation of resilient, uh, self-regulating kids. And so we're always sort of dissecting our own childhoods and figuring out what we want to do that's different. I would say, my parents are pretty like hippie-ish and pretty hands-off. Um, they and that worked for me, and would it work for every kid? Like, I don't know, right? I think as we think about being parents, some things we don't subscribe to that are traditionally used in parenting are things like, punishing kids and having them be alone when they can't regulate their own feelings and emotions. Like we happen to believe that when a child struggles to like regulate their response to something, it's actually when they need you to be with them, to just like partner with them through figuring out that. I love this notion of, big feelings and little bodies, right? And how they just don't have the tools yet. And you want to help develop them so they can be regulating adults. I feel like a lot of problems in this world are due to adults that can't regulate their own emotional response or feelings to something. And then they do something, act out in some way, sabotage themselves, so how do we build them? How do we build that as parents is always a question for us.
I could go on the parenting thing all day, but it's funny that we got off on this little tangent, but it's because it's top of mind. I'm sure it is for you too, right? Like it's the most important thing in our lives.
It is.
So it's hard, even though you're an expert at like 90 other things, where we kind of get back to like, hey, this is another dad who seems really thoughtful and intentional. I just got to ask. I'm sorry,
And by the way, parenting is also about leadership, right?
Right.
And a lot of what you learn as a parent, you apply as a leader, and vice versa. And also, we're all trying to figure out how we were parented, because by the way, like that influences the type of colleague and leader we are. So it's in some ways it has nothing to do with kids. It also has to do with us.
Yeah. Can you talk to me about the luxury of feeling unrushed?
Well, yeah, I have thought about what I'm working towards, and you get to a point in your career where you're starting to, re-examine exactly why you are doing what you're doing. It's easier early on because you're just trying to find a passion that can make enough money to support yourself or a family eventually. And then if you're fortunate enough to get that box checked, then it's like, okay, what am I working for? Am I keeping myself occupied? Is it because I have loyalty towards my team? Is it because I haven't achieved my mission yet and I have more work to do there? Is it because I want a better lifestyle? And if it's not as much about buying more things, I kind of want fewer things these days. Like, what is it about? Um, And so, all those things, by the way, are drivers for me these days. I do have loyalty towards my team. I care about the creative industry. I feel my DNA is part of this company that I'm a part of now, that acquired my company many years ago. But I also think increasingly I'm working for the sensation of being able to be where I am and to not always feel like I'm living at the mercy of so many other people's schedules and clocks, but that I have a little bit more uh, ability to focus on the things that matter most to me. And as I've been able to influence my own role, in my day job, I've always been trying to get closer and closer to the things that I am genuinely interested in, that leave me with more energy after every meeting than at the beginning of the meeting. And when it's the opposite, if you have the luxury to have less of that stuff in your life, you should do so, because then you will feel less rushed. You'll feel more present. I learned, I think, some of this from my father, who is a was a surgeon and and was a very busy, hardworking doctor. I think I learned a lot of work ethic from him. And he had a packed day every day, but he always was with every patient, like fully. And he was notoriously always behind schedule. People in his waiting room might complain, yet when they were in there with him, they cherished the fact that he was like there and present. So that is another thing I think about. You can still be a professional, you can still be busy, and still aspire to not feel rushed.
We spoke 5 years ago. You had been acquired, your company Behance, by Adobe. You had, I believe, your role at the time was like SVP of product, maybe something like that. And I thought, well, you'll kind of do your time at Adobe. Maybe there's an earn out period, whatever, however those things go through acquisition, and then you'll go on to your next thing. But that's not the case. Now you're doing other things. You invest, you work with other people, but you have been promoted now at Adobe, maybe multiple times since we last spoke. I don't think this is normal where somebody gets acquired and now you're like a senior leader at this large company that acquired your business. I'd love to learn a little bit about your mindset of why you've decided to stay, and not only stay, but take on bigger roles within Adobe since your company was acquired.
Yeah, no, and I even left and came back. I'm one of the boomerangs, as we like to call them, at Adobe. For me, it's always been about people, mission, customers, and what I like being up at night thinking about. And to this day, it has been about the impact of creators on the world and outfitting creative people. That's always been a mission for me, a passion for me. And when I started Behance back in 2007, 2006, I didn't know at that time whether I was a serial entrepreneur, where it would just be like I get passionate about something, build it, but then jump to something entirely different and build it and then move on again, versus a mission-driven entrepreneur, where I'd be so driven by a mission that I would do it whatever which way I could. Big company, small company, public company, private company. I ended up realizing I very much was the latter. And that doesn't mean that I'll never get passionate about something different again. And I have had some side passions that were different along the way. But I'm pretty motivated, by what we're doing and how we're doing it. And each time I feel like, okay, I might be done now. There's like a new challenge presented, a new dynamic that shifts in the world of technology and creativity and design that just re-engages me again. Most recently, it has just been the advent of AI and the entire set of contradictions and questions and assumptions that this whole world opens. And I just felt like, wow, like I want to be there. I want to be part of this as we figure it out. So we'll see. But it's exciting, and to lead a large organization, to be part of a senior team I really respect. It's really just the seven of us at the top of the company that work together every week to make some of these decisions that I think really impact our industry. It's super exciting still.
One of the roles of a senior leader like you are, Chief Strategy Officer now, and EVP Design and Emerging Products at Adobe. So how many people actually report up to you?
Oh my goodness. Um, well, let's see. In the Chief Product Officer role, which I played formally for the last 5 years, was 5 to 7,000. Now it's probably a lot less than that, but still a lot more than I was used to in as a CEO of a private company.
Wow. Thousands of people. So we talked about this a little bit last time, but I think it's important to bring up and also to get your thoughts now that 5 years have passed. But you seem to always be really good at understanding the role of communication as a leader and how important that is. In fact, you said you have to always be narrating the journey. It's something I've repeated probably 1,000 times since we talked about how important it is to narrate the journey. Can you share more and maybe an updated thoughts on the importance of effective communication as a senior leader or as a leader in general, and why you feel part of your role is to narrate the journey for the team?
Well, the metaphor I always use is that all of us that are leading a bold new venture, a startup, or a turnaround in a big company, anything volatile and long term, we are essentially driving our team across country in a car with the windows blacked out in the back seat, and they have no idea where they're going, whether they're making progress, and how much further they have to go. And that is a really bad state for any team to be in. And it's the default state for any team that's embarking on something bold. And so we, as the driver, right, we need to narrate the journey, the ups and downs, the progress that we're making. Remember, a lot of the research is that progress begets progress. People feel they're making progress, and then they make more progress. And so that's really important. That's about storytelling. It's about honesty. It's about directness. And it's about constantly weaving the narrative so that people are carried along with us. So you're asking about updated thoughts on this topic. First of all, I think that very few leaders in big companies do this because they feel like they're being repetitive, or they feel like they're sharing too much. And in fact, yet when people hear the story and they hear it again and again, and they hear from their leader, that keeps them engaged. But also for customers want story. They want to hear from the people, not the company. They don't want press releases and polished, old or antiquated messages that were completely, removed of any emotion or boldness or edge. They want the real deal. And so I've started to use this term, persona-led growth, as opposed to product-led growth. Product-led growth is when you have teams building in features that help people feel successful more quickly in the product so that they share it and the product grows without any marketing spend. Persona-led growth to me is when the people behind the product start sharing how the product works and what their true unvarnished views are, when things change or get launched, what the stats are, what the data is, such that the product ends up growing itself without marketing spend. So it's the same concept. And when you see people like Mark Zuckerberg do a review of the Vision Pro versus the Meta Quest, when you see Elon Musk, going out and taking a poll on what features should be added, when you see Toby from Shopify commenting on the ecosystem, in real time, where, PR departments are probably feeling blindsided right and left. Everyone feels like their leaders are taking risk, and yet this is persona-led growth at its best. And so I've tried to do that, and I've always been doing it, in a respectful way, but in a candid and real-time way, because I think that's what customers want.
How do you manage that now, like being a part of a big company? I feel like I've been very lucky for work some of the big companies I have. However, it feels like a lot of the corporate service, why is this so common?
Well, I think that we live in a world where everything can be dissected and taken out of context and what have you. Ironically, the more polished and vague and, hand wavy a press release is, the more skeptical people are of it. Where if you come out and just answer things directly, head on, people respect that. Whenever there is a controversy online about something, in one of our tools or one of our decisions or whatever else, and I come in and I'm just like, I hear you. And first of all, you're not wrong. Like this part of what you're saying, we should have done that better. But let me just tell you, like, this is what we're trying to do. This is why. And we're not done yet. It oftentimes ends the conversation because people got what they wanted, which was the leader to come out and hear them, take responsibility, and be straight with them. Instead, you have these like polished press releases which is like defensive and vague and skirty and reiterating our mission as a company, which no one needed to hear. It's like, so I think that that's what every company does by default because it's someone's job, and I think as a company scales and everyone has a job to do, sometimes the problem in the company is that you're letting everyone, do their job so they can say they did, as opposed to taking a step back and saying, wait, how should we evaluate or, respond, to this situation?
Is that hard though for you?
I think I think that a company needs to identify the few people. And again, also remember, every big business tries to scale every function. Everything needs a process. Everything needs to, be a well-oiled machine. If one person's sick that day, the next person should be able to do it. What we're talking about right now, though, defies that a little bit, right? It's not scalable. It's not normal to find a few people in an organization that you empower to speak in real time on behalf of the brand is hard. I think that every company, though, should identify, empower, promote, if necessary, some of the people that are their outward facing narrative building people, because this is the world we live in. Like this is what customers want. They want direct connection with people, not not official anonymous spokespeople from brands.
How did this happen at Adobe and you? Did this just kind of like gradually earn their trust and you just did it and they're like, oh, Scott's, he's smart. This looks good. Or do you actually have conversations and be like, Scott's going to be one of the few guys that's going to be out there kind of just sharing his thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think, listen, Adobe has a number of people around the company, including some of our evangelists, who we've empowered to be out there, engaging with customers day to day. And I think over recent years, we've gotten even better at this. And I think listen, I've been in this industry for 15 years, I guess, and I've been at Adobe for many of those years, at least 10 of them. And I think that over time, I was able to develop and exercise my own voice, on behalf of the products we were building and how we were building them. And, my colleagues at the company have been really supportive of it. So I feel fortunate. And I now try to convince, friends of mine at other companies, especially those who are leading other companies, to find their own voice or find someone with a voice and empower them to start to tell the company's story in real time.
This is from, it might be your pinned tweet or pinned tweet thread, but you should never outsource your story or any core component of your competitive advantage. And I feel like that flows with this. And I think, Scott, though, it goes beyond just a company. I think people need to think about this. Don't outsource your story or try to hire somebody else to tell it for you. You're probably, in most cases or all cases, the best person to tell, whether it's your individual story as a leader or even the story of your company. It's best to get good at that and get reps at that, maybe through writing, through speaking, however, podcasts. It's worth it to get good at that versus outsourcing that to somebody else.
Well, if you think about how you win really, really hard to hire employees, how you retain anxious employees when you go through the volatile, messy middle of a journey, how you woo investors, how you convince customers to take a risk on you when you're a new company with a new unknown brand. All of these things you have to do are about narrative and communications and telling that story. So when startups hire PR firms out of the gate or marketing agencies to tell their story for them, it's a massive red flag for me as an investor, because I'm like, wow, if you can't do that yourself and iterate it and tell it over time naturally, Like, good luck on all these things that you're going to have to do going forward to be a successful business. I think it's one of the absolute core capabilities, that differentiates most companies. I also, and therefore, I don't think that you should outsource it. I don't think you should outsource anything that is truly differentiating of your business. Outsource the stuff that is not differentiating, the stuff that is commoditized, accounting. Like, you don't need your own accountant for many, many years, right? So don't hire one and don't become best in class at accounting. Get an accounting firm to do it for you, right? But when it comes to, if you're a customer or consumer facing interface, don't outsource design. Like, that's going to differentiate you. If you're an AI company and you're billing yourself as one, don't outsource your model development, because then you're just wrapping something that someone else is making that anyone else can get. So, same with communications. I just think it's more true.
Of another guy's trying to kill me.
Mm,
That's when you really learn. And I did learn in the meeting rooms and at practice a little bit and from watching others some, but nothing is quite like the pressure of the guys in your face as a quarterback when everyone's watching and they're there and you got to step in and make the shot. And I feel like that's what your prototype versus tons of meetings mentality is. And I think, again, this is a portable lesson beyond someone making a product. This is just life in general, bias for action versus thinking and meeting too much.
yeah, I love the connection between that idea of prototyping worth 100 meetings, which I can talk about, and
Mhm.
operating with a bias towards action. Usually people don't make that connection, but it's true. I mean, what a prototype is intended to do is show, not tell. When people are pontificating around a room, talking about what something should and shouldn't do, and what something should include and not include, and whatever, you can have endless meetings like that and never get anywhere. For me, a really well thought out prototype is like a hot knife through the butter of bureaucracy, right?
Mm.
It just gets everyone aligned instantly. Now, they may disagree and it may be the wrong solution, but at least it's something to react to. Like, you're seeing something real, as opposed to pontificating and having endless meetings about the specs of something before a designer has even touched it. So, in some ways, a prototype prompts decisiveness. And to your point, decisiveness is a key towards operating with a bias towards action, right? Just give me a decision, even if it's that we have to start from scratch again. Like, that's more helpful than endless meetings. What people want, by the way, and it's usually in a plane somewhere, right? But forcing myself to build this newsletter called Implications, was a great way of being a part of the creator economy that we're always talking about with our customers. And I don't think any other executive that I'm working with is actually also part of the creator economy. So I just think it gives me a great vantage point. And yes, I learned how to use Adobe Express better and how to, schedule posts on social platforms and what have you. But I also learned how the economics work and who are the readers and how do these Substacks grow and all that sort of stuff. And so it's so important to put yourself in it. And some people I'm working with are probably like, why does Scott spend time writing a newsletter? But it's being the patient, right? And every doctor talks about their experience being a patient as transformative in terms of being a medical professional. Yet no one wants to be a patient, of course. So, I think that that's part of it. The other part of it is just making time every day to hear from customers. Now, easier said than done, right? It's not like I'm going every day to some marketing agency or some design team or something and sitting with them. But what I do every day is I search on social media and see what the people I'm following are saying, and I engage in the discussions that people are having on our products. And in some ways, that's like hitting 10 to 20 customers a day if you're really engaging with them, asking questions, seeing what their responses are. So I also think that using tools like social is really helpful.
And the writing element is, I'll beat the drum forever, from a leadership perspective. And you've written books, you write a Substack, so you regularly have written and are writing. How does writing help you as a leader?
Well, like you, Ryan, and others who have, done a lot of writing, you'll know that this is how we synthesize our thoughts. And it's a creative discipline, by the way, in and of itself. Like it's my equivalent of being in the art studio. I'm always writing little things down that either mean more or less to me later down the line. I love tending to these things and feeding them with little things I learn and then eventually debuting them and sharing them and getting feedback on them. It's just such an amazing cycle. And it has introduced me to founders that I now work with. It has refined my thinking in many ways. This writing has also had a great influence on the strategy narrative at Adobe and the work that I've done to help develop the company's strategy. And I think it's a great practice, but it takes focus. It takes unplugging from this attention-seeking machine that we're a part of in our everyday lives. And it's rewarding, to put something out there, and then see other people build on it. You feel like you're adding to the vernacular. You've like committed something to open source that is, advancing thinking, in your industry, which is just a great sensation, and everyone should take some time to do it.
What made you call your Substack Implications?
Well, I've personally grown tired of all of the newsletters and everything that's just chronicling what's new. It's relatively easy to write about press releases and new advancements in anything. What I'm more interested in is the implications of this stuff and getting creative about what could happen as a result of what's happening. So whether it's a new imagery, text image model emerges, what is that going to do to specific industries? Or AI, how is it going to impact business models in the future? Like, what will the new business models be if people are buying fewer seats of something, but they're buying more virtual workers that are essentially virtual seats of something? How do you capture that? I mean, these are all sorts of nuances, right, that are fun to brainstorm about. And what I like is that it's untethered. I'm not a journalist that needs to be fact checked. I'm writing about the potential implications of things that may or may not be right. And I just find it to be a super creative exercise. So it's implications of stuff.
Scott, if
implications.com happened to be available. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to run with this.
I love it. I love that you do it. I remember I was one of the, I signed up immediately. And so I love reading it every time you publish. Scott, if I was running Harvard Business School, one of the first calls I would make would be to you. And I would say, Scott, would you please teach a class for me? And you can teach, you can do whatever you want, but I do want to title the class, okay? And the class is going to be called The Most Important Thing. And this is going to be about leadership. What would be in that class that you're teaching? What would be in the class, Scott Belsky's The Most Important Thing About Leadership class?
Wow, that's a tricky question because I think that there's obviously so much to cover. But if I had to think of one word, it would probably be empathy. And I think the reason is because empathy is always a shortcut for building great products. Empathy is a shortcut for overcoming any challenge in teams. It's a shortcut for effective marketing to customers. It's also a shortcut for self-awareness. When you start to feel what people are going through, you become more aware of your own impact on that and and where you're at fault. And I just think that, these are the capabilities that advance you the most. And it comes down to empathy. I think that a lot of the mistakes people make in business are because of a lack of empathy. When you're 30 degrees off of product market fit and you ship something that no one actually ended up wanting, it's not because it was a bad idea. Oftentimes it may have been a great idea, but you weren't empathetic with the customer suffering the problem. You create it out of your passion for a solution as opposed to your empathy with the customers that are actually suffering every day. And you would have figured out a better go-to-market or a more effective interface or the right feature set if you had had that empathy. So I think that would be my answer.
That's interesting because if you ask a general number of people about
Team, it's what helps me get unstuck. And so you asked about a leadership class. And leadership is not about finding and leading through the happy path. The happy path in product is when everything goes exactly as you'd expect. The customer clicked the right button at the right time and had 100% undivided attention while they're using your product. That's called the happy path. And whenever you design for the happy path, you get screwed, right? So leadership is about the everything off the happy path, right? And it's and that is about tuning into people. I think that the best products in the world and businesses tune into our natural human tendencies as customers. And I think that, again, all comes down to empathy.
Can you tell me what you learned from your aunt, Arliss?
Yeah, I think, I think you're probably referring to what I wrote about, in my book. I had an aunt who passed away from cancer and lived, for 15 years with it. Um, and it's one of those classic stories of being told you've got 6 months to live for 15 live a little bit more for the day so I can feel that sense of accomplishment and focus. And, this was our list, right? She would, to her last days, focus on a garden project. She very much, thank you for, reminding me how I stated it. She very much decided to be part of the living, right? As opposed to spending every day thinking about, well, they gave me 6 months, let's tidy up the will, let's leave everything as it should be. She was always living every day. And that was a great, great example for me. I want to be able to live my life, in a similar fashion.
I appreciate you sharing. So I know those things can be emotional, but it seems like you have a twinkle in your eye talking about her, which is really cool. I appreciate that. One more question. We were talking last time about the messy middle. You said there was just a bunch of notes, like Evernote notes, hundreds and hundreds, and you had to kind of scale back and take the best of the best, and a certain number of them got published after you structured a thing. Do you still have like a bunch of Evernotes now that could turn into another book, or do those Evernote notes go into implications? What's next from a writing perspective beyond implications?
Yeah, well, I'm a Notion person now, so
okay.
I use a really rather crazy database these days. I still am always trying to connect the dots with all the things that I've written. I write lots and lots of little things, right? And then I'm always trying to piece them together. Some of the stuff that was left on the cutting room floor for the messy middle, I'm still determined to do something with. So occasionally I'll find a way of inserting it, into something. But I think the discipline of writing, again, for me, is like the real creative discipline that I like to immerse myself in for at least a few minutes every day. Mm-hmm. And it's just and I also kind of after every run, I kind of jot a few things down. But I like the database nature of Notion because I can sort of link to things from things, and that's really been a benefit for me.
I would love to see some of those notes. I'm sure some of them come out on Twitter and in implications, but Scott, I really appreciate you coming back. I know this has absolutely flew by. I know we got to run right now, but I highly recommend people check out Implications, your Substack. Where else would you send my viewers, listeners, to learn more about you online?
Yeah, well, I'm just at Scott Belsky on whatever platform is your choice in the social world. Implications.com is the newsletter. And then, the last book was The Messy Middle. And hope folks who are at least navigating any bold journey and some volatility that comes with it, you might find it useful.
I feel like a lot of people now use that phrase. I'm in the messy middle. I'm in the messy middle. And, I'm like, I'm sure you got that from Scott. So it's so true, man. But thank you again for being here, man. I would love to continue our dialogue as we both progress.
So every 5 years, if not sooner. Sounds good.
Let's do it sooner next time, okay? Maybe in person. That would be fun to do it in New York. All right, man. Thank you.